digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we're joined by Lee from Microsoft and Amelia. And I'm going to let Amelia explain exactly who she is and what she does for herself.
Hello to anyone from me as well. Very happy to be on air with you. So I studied information and communication system engineering. So I started off as a developer with a startup which was a platform for classified for boats. But then I somehow ended up working for as an editor for a Glamour magazine. So I got stuck in that fashion tech twilight zone ever since. So I've been working a lot with startups, but I've also been working with organizations and companies in fashion that wanted to bring innovation and work closer with startups. One of the things in London that I've done and was more known of is I designed the fashion tech accelerator for London College of Fashion called Front Row. And I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you. And Lee, why don't you explain to folks just exactly what a technical evangelist at Microsoft does?
Yeah, so I'm a technical evangelist at Microsoft in the UK, and I'm responsible for UK games and education. So my role is really to, number one, ensure that lecturers and teachers and students have access to our resources and learn about what Microsoft is doing in terms of technology, from things like Internet of Things, all the way through to working with middleware partners like Unity and Unreal to be able to support Windows 10 and Xbox. And then I work with the indie game developers in terms of, helping them showcase their games and get their games onto our Windows platforms, be that Windows Phone, Windows 10, using our cloud services, or even going all the way up to Xbox One.
Okay. So I wanted to talk today about this shift in mentality that we've seen over the last few years, where we're seeing now that a lot of young people are really getting into this entrepreneurial spirit, this digital nomad style of thinking, in as much as the notion of going to university isn't necessarily the standard anymore. There's a lot of people who would quite happily go and start up a new business, and some, in fact, who are doing that even while they're at university, and that's what they're moving into. And we see a lot of these really young entrepreneurs who've gone on to do amazing things. Lucky Palmer is a great example of that. And I'm just curious, in terms of your sentiments and what you're seeing with your accelerators and incubators that you work with, Amela, whether you are seeing that there is a shift towards younger and younger applicants and people who may not necessarily have the commercial experience and have worked in the corporate environment.
Yeah, I think more and more people are ready to jump into, starting their own thing rather than starting from a lower paid job and working their way up, which is great because, it took a while, at least for Europe, to, become more entrepreneurial friendly, even in terms of culture. Now it's totally acceptable and it's absolutely cool to say that I'm an entrepreneur. I think, though, it also has some misconceptions in it. So the cool factor has also created some misconceptions about what really it means to run a startup. And I think a lot of kids, especially the ones that haven't got any work experience, sometimes don't know exactly what they're going in for. But, it's life and it's never bad to learn the hard way.
And Lee, what's your sentiment in terms of the types of people you're working with from a new startup perspective? Are you seeing that there is perhaps a lack of experience that you're coming across?
No, so I think what's really interesting at the moment is a great passion for people to be entrepreneurs. I think, even going all the way down to things such as code.org, so Hour of Code, it's very entrepreneurial in its approach. And again, a lot of the mentors and speakers and advocates of programs such as code.org are entrepreneurs, so I think it's really bringing home to children and again, students of all ages that the opportunity is there to do your own thing. And, I think what's really great at the moment is there's so much support out there from, SAIF's funding or other government loans. As Microsoft, we're doing lots of opportunities with people like Green Shoots, where we've partnered with Creative England and the Welsh Assembly in terms of helping to fund those new startups. So I think there's never been a greater time for students who, number one, don't feel they're ready for university and they want to be an entrepreneur. They've got a great opportunity today. And for those students who are at university and have ideas, I think, we're in an era now of technology where if you can dream it, we can sort of build it, which is a great analogy. We've never really been there before. And again, technology is so open to all. Now, I know some children as young as 6 who can now code.
Oh gosh, it's scary, isn't it, when you think of it that way?
And this is really interesting when you start talking to those students at university about that younger demographic of, these are going to kick your ass because they understand all this before you even do. They are digital natives.
Yes.
At the highest extent. So I think it's a great opportunity to really go out there and try things. And again, I think there's such an opportunity of being able to try and fail. Everybody's talking about fail fast, aren't they, in every industry? And I think that's just something people are quite happy to accept and take on board now. Is let's try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, think of something new.
And so on that basis, considering that we're talking about this emergence of young digital natives just getting in there and rolling up their sleeves and doing this and being facilitated by the technology that's out there, do you think then that people who are slightly more established or coming from big corporations and typical corporate working are perhaps handicapped by comparison then to these young people who are able to move so quickly and able to adapt to whatever's coming out and whatever's happening?
I don't think they're necessarily handicapped, and I wouldn't compare their skills. I mean, one has something that the other is missing, but I think it's becoming more and more apparent that there's need to be more collaboration and co-creation processes within companies, from companies with startups to even schools. Me being in the fashion tech space, which is like two different industries that have very similar characteristics. So they're both about, creativity, coming up constantly with new things, big appetite, for innovation, for new stuff, but also very fast paced and with very good funding, I might say. So I think, there are two industries, and that what really caught my attention there is that there are two industries that can challenge each other. Up to now, it took a while to warm up to each other, and I think still we haven't really seen fashion tech people really working together as a team. Usually when you see something, especially if it's a real life product like wearable tech, you can see like from the product if the tech team or the fashion team is leading the project. And I think up to the point that this will become seamless, that will be the point where we will really have beautiful products with great functionality, but we will also see deeper integrated solutions. Now, even like VR, for instance, which is like the hot topic, everybody wants to talk about VR.
You had to get it in the school.
It's fantastic to talk about VR. It's like augmented reality a few years back. It's great because you can see it. And usually it's a guy that wants to show nice numbers on a spreadsheet. This is how much PR we got out of that, buzz, blah, blah, blah. So it's a great tool for people that, can use it on a superficial level. But the truth is that, VR, it's great for storytelling. It can probably work best on if it's deeper integrated. So in the aspect of production for B2B solutions. But nobody really talks about that because it takes somebody that understands both industries to come up with a solution like that and a use of the technology like that. So if we want to see a really effective use of technology, we need to bring these talents from various worlds together. And I think the more people start working together, the better things they can achieve.
Okay, so Lee, since we've managed to open the can of worms now on VR, which somehow I've not been able to escape this topic now for the last month. It's just every time we get on a call, somebody wants to talk about VR. But let's hear from your point of view. Obviously, you're in a very interesting place with VR and AR and mixed reality and whatever initials you want to throw together to come up with a new phrase. I think obviously you're very kind of deep in that. What are you seeing in terms of the resourcing and the skill sets that are available for that? Because I think there is a sentiment that there is at the moment for people who are trying to create content, a lack of skill sets out there. And I don't mean necessarily creatively. I mean more from a kind of almost a post-production end in terms of stitching, in terms of that, the technicality of it's great once you've caught the footage, and a lot of people are talking about catching the footage, but what you do with that footage afterwards is a bit that I think there's perhaps a bit of a gap in terms of skill sets available right now.
Okay. I disagree, to be honest. So I'm going to go back to your previous question a little bit. But one of the key things that I've been doing in Microsoft in the UK specifically is working with a number of institutions in setting what we call industrialized projects. And this is where we give the universities a brief and the team-based projects. So we go to the university and say, look, to do this project and have our collaboration, we want a team-based project, which generally starts with a minimum of 5 people and goes all the way up to 10 people in a team. And ideally, we want mixed skill sets. So we might go to a gaming course and say we want artists, we want audio people, we want computer programmers, games developers, and narrative people to work as a team. And we might then go to a traditional university CS department and say, look, we want you to work with your design department or art department to build an app or solution or technology. And the real number one reason we've done that is because we see this whole issue of lack of commerciality. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, it's the students are far too much have been creating what we call binware in the industry. So 8 to 12 week projects that are great academic projects, but the students never demonstrate them in portfolios or never take them any further. So the whole idea of this is to create modules and exercises where students can take those further so they can use them as a real CV item, or more importantly, showcase what they've achieved. So we have a competition called Imagine Cup. So it's imaginecup.com is the URL. And one of the teams did this last year and they did VR. So they built a solution using Oculus Rift. And what the project was around teaching. So we partnered with a medical institution. And the process was a serious game. And the serious game was teaching both student doctors and nurses and doctors and nurses who were treating dementia patients. And it was to teach them what having dementia was physically like. So everybody can read a textbook and understand dementia and understand the medication involved in dementia. But the project was set around them creating an experience where the physician could wear a Rift and then become encased in this world of dementia.
Wow.
So it was amazing. So it was an amazing project. And this team went on to win the Imagine Cup because this was, a worldwide citizen and innovation challenge, which was just so amazing. And the output was so amazing. And the team's called Opaque Multimedia, if anybody's interested in looking at it.
We'll make sure that URL is on the podcast notes. Thank you.
But that's a great example of where we've taken a project which could be seen as an academic project, but it's created this company, and they've now created this company and they're a new startup, but they're still students, but they've got this company there working. And again, we've done other examples like that where we've taken student teams and created them into these startups because they've seen this opportunity. Number one, they've been given a project, they've been given a client, and at the end of it, they have a solution and go, oh my God, we're actually, now a company or
bona fide company.
And so it's given them that little push to take that binware project to something in reality. And I think VR is one of these places now where I have to be honest, it's becoming I wouldn't say it's becoming easier, but it's becoming easier to develop for VR and AR with toolkits like Unreal. So there's a great toolkit for Unreal which supports Kinect now. So you can plug your Kinect into a PC, run the Unreal client, and then you've got spatial awareness within your VR environment using Kinect. So, Kinect is like £100, isn't it, these days? So you had a Rift, which is fully supported, or, all the other devices. So there's lots of others, HTCs. So I think there's so many different devices on the market. I think it's now really coming down to what tool sets you want to use to make them work, whether it's on Unity, whether it's Unreal. But with the opportunity in middleware, it's making it easier for everyone.
I should probably have clarified. I meant 360 film. in terms of the skill sets that are missing, because I think there's a lot of people in the film industry who are still trying to figure it out, whereas in the games industry I do think you're right in terms of the amount of technology that's out there and the tools that are out there is making it a lot more accessible and certainly easier for smaller independent studios to kind of throw something together and put something out there reasonably easily. But certainly in the film industry, I think there is still this confusion about what the skill sets are that they need in order to stitch together those experiences once they've gone out and they've shot something with a 360 camera. So, and I don't think anybody yet has really, not that I've seen, has really cracked true immersive film experience versus true immersive
I think
game experience.
the real issue as well comes down to consumerization of those devices. So at the moment, even VR in gaming isn't a commercial marketplace. You know, there's no way as an indie developer you can sell VR-enabled content. People build VR-enabled content as an add-on to an existing Steam game or Xbox title. But at the moment, there isn't, you know, an Oculus Rift VR store as such. You know, there is plans to do things like this, but I think, you know, the products are still very at their infancy. You know, look at how many versions of Oculus there's been, and, you know, Crescent Bay's coming out soon, which will hopefully be the consumer version. And again, you know, as Microsoft, we've got things like HoloLens, and, you know, there's so many opportunities in VR and AR. And I think what we'll probably see is more, you know, as we see today, is more traditional uses in serious games and simulators, because number one, that's, you know, it's an enclosed environment, it's a confined customer as such you're dealing with. So I think we'll see a lot more of that, and then hopefully we'll move more into the 3D, you know, 3D TV space.
Do you really think that's where it's going to go?
I don't know. My personal opinion on VR is it's very isolated. You know, it's one-to-one experiences very much, and I'm not sure until we have, you know, translucent or perceptive devices that will make a VR AR experience holistic to a group of people. You know, I've been to a few events where we've used, like, you know, the Google Cardboard devices. So one of our companies from Microsoft Ventures is called Visor, so VISR.com, and they create the new Google Cardboard. And we went to lots of events with them, but again, it's a very isolating experience once you put a device over your eyes and you can't see anything.
Or you add the earphones and then you can't hear anything either.
Yeah, exactly. Then you're really isolated, and then you get 6% of people with motion sickness who need to find the closest bucket.
But, you know, I think it's really interesting that we're talking about this kind of, you know, where we think VR and AR is going. But you know what? The question I wanted to ask you, Amelia, was actually to go back to your kind of point about this need to collaborate and to work hand in hand in terms of the intent for the technology and the actual execution of the technology. And I was curious from a kind of a fashion industry perspective. Obviously, you work with people who want to create wearables, because, you know, wearables is this other cool hip topic that everybody loves to talk about. If we can strap it onto a part of our body and it does something really not kind of meaningful but interesting, that's usually considered as wearable. But I know that you have worked with people like Unseen, and there is this other end of the spectrum when it comes to wearable fashion, where we're talking about things like material alchemy, and we're talking about messing around with things at a more kind of a basic level, chemistry level, if you like, molecular level. And that's still considered as wearable technology. And I'm interested to understand from your perspective whether or not you think there is a market or there is a kind of a growing interest in that more hands-on with science wearable versus necessarily big bulky piece of technology that we slap onto some part of our body.
Yeah, I wouldn't really label it wearable technology, because there's, apart from the technology that goes into the production of the new material, there isn't much technology there. So for me, it's something different, but it is a very interesting area. I mean, I was at an event the other day. I met some girls from Milano that they had a company where they actually produce fabric from the waste from oranges and lemons, you know, when you make a juice, what's left of it. So they work with factories that produce juices, and they take the waste and they turn it into fabric. Which is fantastic, you know, great margins. You take garbage essentially and you create fabric. It feels a little bit like a model. So it's like, it's a very easy fabric to work with. So I think more and more of stuff like that we will gonna see, and because the change in technology and production, it's easier and cheaper to produce these things now. I think essentially even with technology and wearables, the point is that, you know, it's not that it's something that, you know, it's a totally new technology, it's a totally new area, it's a totally new market. You know, it's the evolution for fashion for me. Like, we still don't wear leaves out of trees or you know, an animal that we killed. We started processing leather, we started processing cotton to create fabric and all that. So fashion changed. as we learn how to use new tools, new technologies, and we produce different kind of fabrics, and that's how we ended up here. And I think as technology moves forwards, it's inevitable that fashion will as well. I think essentially, it will become more and more transparent, and you won't even realize. For me, even the phone, like your mobile phone, is a wearable tech, if you want to say, because for me, it's my top accessorized. Like, I don't go out without my phone. People, glam their phones up. Most people have an iPhone, not because of the functionality, because of the brand. So they treat it a little bit like a handbag. You have a handbag because you need to carry stuff, but you don't buy a Burberry bag because, it carries stuff better than another bag. You carry it for the brand. And the same thing goes with the phone nowadays. Like, when the telephone was invented, it was more like a kitchen appliance. So it was more like a fridge. It was something in your house that you would use at specific times. But as time went by and technology became lighter, easier to use, more integrated in our lives with all the social media and stuff. So the telephone has evolved as well. So now the telephone is not as close as to the fridge, more closer to a handbag.
It's interesting. I've never heard anybody refer to their mobile phone as an accessory in that way, thinking of it as a handbag. But it is interesting to note the similarities. And I don't know, what would be the guy version of a handbag, Lee?
A man purse.
Your man purse. Yeah.
Your mobile phone is your man purse. It's a new one. I haven't heard that one before. But what I wanted to do is actually this, because you're both really eyeball deep in new technology and new startups and working with different types of tools and software and people. I am curious to understand from each of you what you would consider as your most, I wouldn't say productive, but most high impact tool that you're using, be that Slack or IFTT or whatever the thing might be that you use. What is it that has most impact for you in terms of facilitating what you do and how you operate and manage your life, so to speak? And I'd love to hear from you, Amanda, what that thing would be.
I would love to say Slack or anything else that sounds cool, but the truth is, it all goes back to email, guys. I'm sorry. That's always the core. Like, essentially, as I go through my day, so somebody emails me or, a startup tries to reach me through Twitter, then they ping me on Facebook, then somebody pings me on Slack. So, at a point, you're like, what's a distraction and what's really helping me be more productive? Of course, things are more streamlined and all that, but also, still email is the heart of business. Like, we can't deny that, even if we use Slack, like you use Slack with your teams, maybe with some clients, but it all comes down to email. Another thing that has done wonders for me personally is Snapchat.
Okay.
Because I have Snapchat on my home page on my phone, and it really makes me look that much younger. I'm telling you.
It's all about appearances.
Who needs Botox when you have Snapchat?
Lee, what about you? What would
so,
be...
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting comment, actually, from Amelia. Not the Botox one. So I think email is still key. I think email is still going to be one of the big things. And I'll do a shameless plug now, because I think email is really important to me myself as well. But we use a product within Microsoft called Clutter now for managing our mailboxes. And that's a really, really cool tool. So I can send you some more details on that. But it's a brand new tool which has come out of Microsoft Research, which is based on machine learning. And basically, Clutter is a way of decluttering your inbox by using machine learning. So it understands it understands those emails that you don't look at and don't read, which you wouldn't class as spam, but you don't really look at them, and it creates them as a clutter folder, so you can check your clutter folder occasionally. I think it's very, very cool, very, very useful. And then the other real big killer tool for me is Skype. So within
so you're not naming any of your own products, of course.
No, but I love other products, but I think Skype is really great, because we can do things like this. But again, all our enterprise.
Well, hold on just a minute there, buddy. What about when they all went down and I couldn't do my conference call? What about that poor episode with the really bad audio when we had to jump to another solution?
But that's like any solution, isn't it? But I think, for me, it's about that flexibility of being able to get it on different devices and different platforms. And it doesn't matter where I am, whether I'm on an Xbox or I'm on an iPhone, whether I'm on a Windows device, whether I'm on an Android device or a Google, I've just got access to my communication and it doesn't, and anybody can get me. So I think that's a great thing for me, and having all that facility built in.
Yeah.
And then I think the other real key one is just having that downtime and just being able to enjoy things. So I'm not going to mention a product, but you can understand which one it's going to be.
No more. No, what I was going to say is this: I was going to talk to you about the whole artificial intelligence thing, and the reason I'm going to pick on this and the clutter thing is because I use this thing called Amy Ingram.
Yeah, which is great. Because I thought it was real.
You got suckered, woo! So the thing is Amy is great and she knows a great deal. She can learn a great deal, but there are still inherently problems. And it doesn't take much interrogation for somebody to figure out she's not real. So for anybody who's listening who has not heard of Amy, Amy is an artificial intelligence who schedules meetings for you. So you CC her
She tries.
She tries very hard. She's very persistent. You CC her into your emails, and she's not an app and she's not something on a browser. She is just a person on a CC in your emails that you include. And once you draw her into the conversation, the email chain, she loops you out and she has that conversation. She takes over the conversation between the people who are going to be in your meeting, your participants, and she negotiates in terms of the time and the venue and all of that other stuff. And then the next thing you see is just the meeting invite that you just accept and goes into your calendar. So hypothetically, she reduces the volume of emails that you deal with, because normally there's this email ping pong back and forth about how many people are going to be involved and what times and all that other stuff that you get into this negotiation with. And she reduces about 70% of all of that ping ponging back and forth, and you don't see it anymore. But there are still inherently dangers with that, where she doesn't understand everything and some things will go awry, or sometimes she repeats things, or whatever the little hitches may be. I mean, she is in beta, to be fair, she's in beta. But I am kind of hesitant, having had the Amy experience, I'm kind of hesitant to suggest that clutter wouldn't be any different from that, in as much as it's great to assume that just because you don't read an email, it's not an important email, but it doesn't mean that it's not necessarily important. So what happens when those really important emails that are there, but and you know that they're there somewhere, suddenly kind of get sucked into this clutter folder, because actually you're not reading them every 5 minutes, but you know that it's really important content.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a little bit FOMO too, though. Because, if it's really important, somebody will find a way to get to you. Like, there are so many ways to get through to you that if you don't reply to something very important, people will find a way to communicate and get their point across. So I think it's a little bit that we're afraid, like, what if I miss an email? What if I miss a message? So it's also a little bit of that going in there. I think there are some things that can be streamlined with the help of artificial intelligence. I have a friend that recently launched a Geekbot. Which is essentially a bot for Slack, and they take care of the stand-up meetings, just to figure out the process and all that, and then just sends you a recap of the meeting. So you just, instead of having the meeting with every person in your team, just to go through, the basics of the day and all that, you have your Geekbot do that, and they just send you a recap, which is essentially whatever cut downs on meeting. I think it's great and worth giving a try.
I think there's definitely some room for artificial agents to be involved in doing certain things. But I do, having had the direct hands-on experience and living with Amy for a while now, I do think that there are some things that artificial intelligence just isn't necessarily ready for just yet.
But I think it's to what scale you take it and how it's implemented. So I think, there's always going to be a limitation to the artificial intelligence, and that's based around the number of users, the machine learning processes happening, the science and the algorithms behind it. But if you take things that, the majority of people now use in day-to-day life but don't really realize it's AI, so, Siri, Cortana, how many millions of people every day use, Google Voice, and there's some amazing tech demos that people can just do. So, like, one of my favorite things is when you go abroad. No, but when you go abroad and you say, "Can you tell me the way to the bank in Japanese?" and the phone will literally say to the person in Japanese, "Tell me the way to the bank." And I don't know Japanese, but the phone does. Just seriously, just try it with your devices. It works.
Do you know what though? You're right. It does work.
I would be afraid to insult a Japanese person, to be honest. But
believe me, I think if they saw you talking to the phone,
on that topic, like the voice, I think, it's been pushed so hard, the voice thing. And I don't know why. I think we all agree we like to text more than we like to talk with people. I think that's why texting is so popular in emojis.
Yeah, even just
if you find an assistant that I can deal with emojis, I think that'd be great. But like talking, people avoid talking to their own mothers and they will talk to the phone. I think it's a little bit of a process there.
But Lee, sorry, what was you about to say?
So yeah, I was just, I think there's great things like, the voice dictation. So I use voice dictation, text and things like that all the time, because I'm traveling quite a lot in cars and things, It's just the ability to do that is just making things so much more easy. And I think one of the great things around technology now is the Internet of Things. It's a buzzword, but if you think about it, it's literally everywhere, isn't it now? From being able to turn lights on in your house to a little gadget that, you're wearing on your wrist that tells you what your heartbeat is and how many steps you've walked. And I think technology is now becoming so much more pervasive. It's everywhere. And one of my key things is especially with the younger age group, so, school children, is teaching them to start asking the question why and how. So not just accepting that you can press a button on your phone and talk to it. It's about, well, why would you want to?
This brings me to an interesting point, which has been raised on this show before, because there's a person who's been on this show who will remain nameless. He knows exactly who he is, and when I say this, he's going to cringe that I'm using this phrase again. But it was once suggested that there is a growing learned helplessness that is occurring on mobile technology. In as much as we have become so dependent on the technology, we no longer understand how to do basic things anymore, or we can't think about that as a first priority to do that thing. So, for example, if we're on our way somewhere and our phone battery dies, suddenly we don't understand how to read a basic map anymore. It's like, what? I don't know. How do I get that? Or that thing of, I need to actually physically go and find a phone book and look up a number. What? It's that notion of not having the instancy of access to the technology. We've become dependent and reliant on that technology in the same way that young people, aren't asking the questions anymore. For many young people now, when you say go do some research, that means go Google something.
Go to YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube it or Google it. It doesn't mean go to a library and actually look through books and figure out, where this, data or go speak to people and find out this information. It just means I'm going to Google it. I'm going to YouTube it. I'm going to find that data and that information somewhere else. And we're getting into that stage where we've become so reliant on that way of utilizing technology and gathering data that we see that thing where I remember seeing a story where somebody who was in a wheelchair at a festival was basically lifted up by the crowd and was crowd surfing in his wheelchair or something along those lines. And people took this photo and they said it was at a different festival. They said it was at Glastonbury or somewhere like that. And it turned out that actually, and so this went viral. Loads and loads of people retweeting this thing and sharing this photo of this guy, in a wheelchair, crowd surfing, and saying, oh, Glastonbury's awesome. They do this wonderful thing. They did this thing. And it turned out it wasn't at Glastonbury. It had nothing to do with Glastonbury. This guy was not at Glastonbury at all. But nobody paused to check the facts because we've become so, like I say, we've just got to that stage now where we see something, we kind of just blithely, yeah, sure, I'll take that on fact. And sure, there's a certain, section of society, probably the older section of society, who's a little bit cynical sometimes. But generalistically, I think people are very passive now about their data. A lot of people look at Wiki and they forget that Wikipedia isn't fact. Wikipedia is still somebody's opinion. And that's collaborative data that's being pulled together. It's not actually necessarily been researched. It's not necessarily proven data. It is somebody's opinion, but we use Wiki as if we would a dictionary. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one, in terms of, I'm using this phrase, learned helplessness, and I know he absolutely hates when I use phrase.
So yeah, I think the whole thing is really interesting from that. I call it digital naivety. So, today's younger generation live on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, and they're not aware of our generation. of once you put it on the internet, it stays on the internet, number one. And I think that is really looking at how they're going to project themselves in the future in terms of opportunities, etc. Not everything they post is bad, but they've just got to be a bit mindful of what they do say and what they do post and what they get involved in. But I think more importantly, it's about how they engage with that content. So I was at a hackathon at Weekend, actually, a gaming hackathon, and where there was a young chap from Denmark there, and he was about 18, this young lad. And he was building this game in Unity, and he said, "Oh, I've only just learnt Unity. I watch YouTube." And he's been watching YouTube for 4 weeks.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And he was probably, I would say, pretty expert. He didn't think he was, but
to be fair, he was pretty motivated. If he was already at a hackathon,
he was seriously motivated. And academically, I would say he was a very good student. But it demonstrated to me, what children can do, what kids can do, and what young people can do just by having this online resource of amazing content, which they can watch and follow and then actually develop and use and develop their own skills. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that learning aspect, or even the contribution of that learning aspect, of them becoming YouTube stars about generating content or resources. I think it's more around the application of the why and how. So that, they could set up an online learning resource, couldn't they, if they wanted to, and charge money. But so I think it's around that commerciality and entrepreneurial aspect where I still think, there's huge opportunity to engage with people, to really, show them what the opportunities are in life, to, what are their opportunities. And I think still it amazes me when you do speak to a lot, especially at school. I love doing careers talk at school where you say to people, what do you want to do? Are you interested in STEM? And they're like, no, I don't really like engineering. And, but it's like, well, that iPhone in your pocket, how do you think that was made?
Yeah.
Or the watch you're wearing, where do you think that?
You're surrounded by it.
Yeah, you're surrounded by it. And, do you want to be part of it, or do you just want to be a consumer of it? And I think it's about just that mindset. I think so many of us are now just consumers, and consumers without care or thought.
Listen, first of all, I would like to clarify here that it's not just about the younger generation, as I like to say, because I was reading recently a post on a tech blog, and they said, we reached out for a comment, but we didn't hear back. And then they had embedded the tweet where they reached out. So reaching out and didn't get a comment, it's like we tweeted the guy and he didn't tweet back. And I was thinking, what about Watergate? Imagine that. Washington Post tweeted Nixon for a comment. He didn't tweet back. Case closed. I don't think that's how journalism is supposed to work. But apart from that, what I've seen is that, again, collaboration and bringing people from diverse backgrounds and with diverse skills helps to have a fresh look with the things and ask more questions, because people tend to have, different ideas, a different perception. Like if you have people working together that they use technology the same way, sometimes, you end up with nothing. Even in San Francisco, so the heart of startups, I've been there. And, sometimes I'm like, my God, back, especially when there wasn't a European startup ecosystem, really, startups were asking me, should we move to Silicon Valley? And my advice usually was no, unless, or your clients are there, because it will kill your creativity. Like, I really believe that, because everybody was same age, had the same lifestyle, used technology the same way. So how can you come up with a solution or something for the world if you are caught in that bubble? For me, in technology, the most dangerous bubble, and in entrepreneurship and startups, the most dangerous bubble is not the financial bubble, is the cultural bubble. Where we assume that everybody consumes the world and faces the world like an entrepreneur does, which is usually not the case. And what I've seen, especially so from startup weekends or hackathons, where we have a vertical and we bring in people from diverse background, you usually hear more fresh ideas. Otherwise, sometimes, when they're hackathon addicts or serial entrepreneurs, you end up hearing ideas that are investable. So it's something that you must have heard before, because what's really new and out there probably isn't investable.
It's interesting that you say that, and you coin that phrase of hackathon addicts, because I do think it is actually becoming a thing. But I do think it's the younger generation who tend to get kind of quite sucked into it, and then they get very energized by the environment of a hackathon. I don't know if you've seen that as much as perhaps I have, Lee, in some of the things that you go to, but what's your sentiment?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to how much you can earn doing hackathons. And I'm being serious, and this, is that, I was at a hackathon recently, and the amount of swag was unbelievable. One guy who won quite a few of the categories literally had to have an estate to pack it all away. And it was amazing swag, So I think some developers, and good luck to them, are actually using hackathons as a job,
as a means to get the results.
Yeah, as a means of reward. Yeah, because and no disrespect to them, because what they're doing is amazing stuff. But if you've got 20 to some of these prize funds are big. It's £20,000 of equipment, and everybody has eBay. So if you don't want it, you eBay it. But for 2 days' work for £20,000 is pretty good. It's good. It's not a bad return. So I, personally, I think that's, I've got no problems with that, because I think that, especially when it's hacked for good and things like that, I think there's some great hacks out there. And again, there's lots of sponsored hacks that take place. And I think the number one thing that I try and always get over at hacks is about what you do for this 24 hours is not just about the 24 hours. It's getting that content out there. So, make sure you use source control. Make sure you create a Git repository and have a GitHub site that is your personal site or your hack site where you can share the content that you've produced, because I've seen so many amazing projects come out of hacks, but they never go any further.
Yeah, and actually the GitHub thing is actually a really good tip, because a lot of people, that is one of the biggest issues, is there is no transparency, there is no sharing of actually what somebody's done. And it just kind of sits and collects dust, and people forget about it.
It never gets even used. It's on hard drive, exactly, yeah.
So, I totally agree with that sentiment. But, and also, for the record, I just went to a hackathon a couple of weeks back, and they were giving out prizes that was literally, it was an annual membership to co-working spaces. So
how much is that worth?
It's literally giving them an office space for the next year. It's like, actually, I can see why people would do that. So, just in general terms, obviously there's quite a lot going on in both of your industries. They're very fast moving, and there is a lot going on. But I'm curious to understand, because we ask this of all of our guests, so I'm going to ask you what you think the most significant change will be in your industries in the next 5 to 10 years, whether that is a cultural shift, whether that is a technological shift. What you think it is that's going to have the single biggest impact on your industry or the way that your industry operates. And I'll start with you, Amelia.
Tough question. I think, because it took a while for fashion to warm up to tech, and now it's like, yes, let's do all the things. So it's a little bit hard to predict what will be the most important. But I think personally that we're at the point now that there is enough familiarity between the two scenes to see some true innovation on production level as well. Okay. So I think, that'd be interesting. We've already seen some startups like Nidan. We also have 3D printing that are kind of, challenging new ways to create and new tools the designers can use to produce fashion as well. Mm-hmm. We also have the wearables, which is a mixed production line, if you like. Mm-hmm. So I think, we're at the point now that, we've had a lot of, B2C startups, e-commerce and all that. And we're ready to take it to the next level, take it a little bit deeper and integrate technology down to the core of the fashion industry.
Okay. And then what about you? What do you think will be the most significant change to what you do?
So Microsoft is a huge thing. So I'll try and pick one area. And I think, this is going to be down to what we class as software as a service. And I think it's going to be the approach of how everybody consumes content in the future, really, in terms of service provision. So when I say service, it's Windows is a great example now. So we're in this continuous update. So we're never going to release a box product of Windows again, for example. And the same with our cloud services. So I think, if you look at some of the statistics, they are crazy. So like our cloud services had something like 500 service updates in the last 3 months. And, as a consumer, these services are just appearing. So you're getting more and more features, more and more enhancement. And again, I think that then just cascades down. So as a service provider, we're providing all these different services that then software developers are using and consuming to build these applications or devices. So, the iteration of devices is becoming faster and faster. We've seen this with Apple, we've seen it with Microsoft, we've seen it with Google, where, we're probably on a 3 to 6 months device, a device to market sale. So it's like, iPhone 5, iPhone 6, iPhone 7, iPhone 8, and it just goes on. But again, these devices are consuming these newish services. So things like voice, things like VR, things like augmented reality, things like machine learning, big data are just becoming more and more there, but not there, if not seen.
Subtly there is what I was going to say.
Yeah, subtly there, but as a consumer, you don't realise it's just a better experience. And it's going to be all key around that experience piece. And again, that transition of experience across the devices where you want to use them and how you want to use them. I don't think there's any longer, I'm going to use this device. It's about, I'm going to use this device because I'm currently here. And when I get to there, I'm going to use this device.
Yeah. I think that because we've got you here, and if I didn't ask you this, I would probably get a verbal lashing from somebody. So I'm going to ask you anyway, Lee, what your thoughts are in terms of the future of VR and AR and Microsoft's stance on things like the HoloLens.
I think it's going to be exciting. That's all I'm going to say. It's going to be really... You've seen lots of demos. I think the best demo I've seen, everybody's seen the Minecraft demo, which is really cool.
I have seen that, actually. It's very fun.
But the Unity team did a great demo at Unite Seattle a few months ago, where they literally devved a devved game on stage using HoloLens. And that was a super cool demo. So just have a look at Unite Seattle 2015, HoloLens, and the guys, and they're not Microsoft guys, the Unity guys doing this on their Unity stage. Yeah. And they build a little farming simulator, and it's quite cool. Okay.
And do you think, in terms of the future for the HoloLens, do you think it is just pure gaming, or do you think there are going to be some additional other verticals that
So at the moment, we have a number of different verticals being showcased. We've got a great architectural, great engineering, and there's also now a HoloLens Academy for Research. So in the US, it's now open to universities. So Carnegie Mellon, MIT are already on board, and they're talking about what they're building. So I think the Carnegie Mellon guys, one of the universities is building a medical simulator for medics, which does does anatomy, and you can actually integrate and interact with human skeleton. There's some amazingly cool stuff that's going to be used for it.
Is there anything going on in the UK for that? Is there an academy?
So the UK research project's not opened yet, but we have a business service live in the UK, talking to lots of big companies.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us on this digital jam session. In order to allow our listeners to follow you and figure out what you're up to and just find out more about your lives, we would like to ask you to share your social media handle of choice, whatever that might be, so they can have a little rummage and see what it is you're up to. So what would that be, Lee?
So mine will be at Lee_Stott, STOTT.
Wonderful. And Amelia?
And mine is at AMA. And then Lucky, as if I'm so lucky to be here tonight with you.
Lucky. Okay. Wonderful. So thank you very much for joining us on this digital jam session. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review. And thanks again for joining us on this digital jam session. digitaljamsessions.com